United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Preamble of the original organic Constitution. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Excerpted from the Declaration of Independence of the original 13 United States of America, July 4, 1776. This page censored at Wikipedia. 4th of July 2002 has come and gone, and Americans honored the holiday with a renewed patriotic fervor that reminded me of the bicentennial celebrations of 1976. As is customary, traditional fireworks displays took center stage and scores of people turned out to witness the dazzling show in the summer sky. With mixed feelings, I sat with friends on a crowded Pennsylvania sidewalk beneath a glittering, mesmerizing explosion of color, pondering the keen sense of sadness and betrayal that overwhelmed my spirit. Looking around at the huge crowds gathered for the annual events, I thought silently, we are not free. In truth, we have not been a free people for a very long time. We celebrate this day in honor of our independence. We call ourselves a free people in a land of liberty. Our anthems proudly sing the praises of this nation, and we raise our voices, wave our flags and join in song, but how many Americans realize they are not free? This is a myth perpetuated by the powers that be in order to avoid any major civil unrest, and to keep us all living under the thumb of a militaristic corporate big brother within the illusions that have been created for us. The truth of the matter is this: what freedom has not been stolen from us, we have surrendered willingly through our silence and ignorance. As Americans, most of us have no idea how our freedoms are maintained or lost. Apparently, our ancestors didn't have a good grasp of this either. It is sad, but it is also very true. Don't point to that beloved parchment, the Constitution, as a symbol of your enduring freedom. It is representative of a form of government which seemingly no longer exists in this country today. The Constitution has been thrown out the window, the republic shoved aside and replaced with a democracy. The thing is, most people in this country remain unaware that this is so, because they simply do not know the truth, what lies beyond the myths. Your so-called government is not going to tell you, either. To even begin to understand what has happened to the republic, we must look backward in time to the period following the Civil War. We must go back to the year 1871, which was the beginning of the decline of the republic. When we examine what happened during that time in our history, we begin to piece together this troubling, perplexing puzzle that is America. Only then should we answer as to whether we are indeed a free people or not. So, let's roll backward into the past for a moment. It is time we learned what they didn't teach us in school. It is far more interesting than what they did tell us. I think you'll stay awake for this lesson. The date is February 21, 1871, and the 41st Congress is in session. I refer you to the Acts of the 41st Congress, Section 34, Session 3, Chapters 61 and 62. On this date in the history of our nation, Congress passed an act titled, An Act to Provide a Government for the District of Columbia. This is also known as the Act of 1871. What does this mean? Well, it means that Congress, under no constitutional authority to do so, created a separate form of government for the District of Columbia, which is a 10-mile square parcel of land. What? How could they do that? Moreover, why would they do that? To explain, let's look at the circumstances of those days. The Act of 1871 was passed at a vulnerable time in America. Our nation was essentially bankrupt, weakened, and financially depleted in the aftermath of the Civil War. The Civil War itself was nothing more than a calculated front for some pretty fancy footwork by corporate backroom players. It was a strategic maneuver by European interests, the international bankers, who were intent upon gaining a stranglehold on the neck and the coffers of America. The Congress realized our country was in dire financial straits, so they cut a deal with the international bankers in those days. The Rothschilds of London were dipping their fingers into everyone's pie, thereby incurring a debt to said bankers. If we think about banks, we know they do not just lend us money out of the goodness of their hearts. A bank will not do anything for you, unless it is entirely in their best interest to do so. There has to be some sort of collateral or some string attached, which puts you and me, the borrower, into a subservient position. This was true back in 1871 as well. The conniving international bankers were not about to lend our floundering nation any money without some serious stipulations. So, they devised a brilliant way of getting their foot in the door of the United States, a prize they had coveted for some time, but had been unable to grasp thanks to our founding fathers, who despised them and held them in check, and thus, the Act of 1871 was passed. In essence, this act formed the corporation known as the United States. Note the capitalization, because it is important. This corporation, owned by foreign interests, moved right in and shoved the original organic version of the Constitution into a dusty corner. With the Act of 1871, our Constitution was defaced in the sense that the title was block capitalized, and the word for was changed to the word of in the title. The original Constitution drafted by the Founding Fathers was written in this manner: the Constitution for the United States of America. The altered version reads, the Constitution of the United States of America. It is the corporate constitution. It is not the same document you might think it is. The corporate constitution operates in an economic capacity, and has been used to fool the people into thinking it is the same parchment that governs the republic. It absolutely is not. Capitalization an insignificant change? Not when one is referring to the context of a legal document, it isn't. Such minor alterations have had major impacts on each subsequent generation born in this country. What the Congress did with the passage of the Act of 1871 was create an entirely new document, a constitution for the government of the District of Columbia. The kind of government they created was a corporation. The new, altered constitution serves as the constitution of the corporation, and not that of America. Think about that for a moment. Incidentally, this corporate constitution does not benefit the republic. It serves only to benefit the corporation. It does nothing good for you or me, and it operates outside of the original Constitution. Instead of absolute rights guaranteed under the organic Constitution, we now have relative rights or privileges. One example of this is the sovereign's right to travel, which has been transformed under corporate government policy into a privilege, which we must be licensed to engage in. This operates outside of the original Constitution. So, Congress committed treason against the people, who were considered sovereign under the Declaration of Independence and the organic Constitution. When we consider the word sovereign, we must think about what the word means. According to Webster's dictionary, sovereign is defined as 1. Chief or highest, supreme. 2. Supreme in power, superior in position to all others. 3. Independent of, and unlimited by, any other, possessing or entitled to, original and independent authority or jurisdiction. In other words, our government was created by and for sovereigns, the free citizens, who were deemed the highest authority. Only the people can be sovereign, remember that. Government cannot be sovereign. We can also look to the Declaration of Independence, where we read, government is subject to the consent of the governed. That's supposed to be us, the sovereigns. Do you feel like a sovereign nowadays? I don't. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a constitutional historian to figure out that this is not what is happening in our country today. Government in these times is not subject to the consent of the governed. Rather, the governed are subject to the whim and greed of the corporation, which has stretched its tentacles beyond the 10-mile square parcel of land known as the District of Columbia, encroaching into every state of the Republic. Mind you, the corporation has no jurisdiction outside of the District of Columbia. They just want you to think it does. You see, you are presumed to know the law. This is ironic because as a people, we are taught basically nothing about the law in school. We are made to memorize obscure factoids and paragraphs here and there, such as the preamble, and they gloss over the Bill of Rights. But we are not told about the law. Nor do our corporate government schools delve into the Constitution in any great depth. After all, they were put into place to indoctrinate and dumb down the masses, not to teach us anything. We were not told that we were sold out to foreign interests and made beneficiaries of the debt incurred by Congress to the international bankers. For generations, American citizens have had the bulk of their earnings confiscated to pay on a massive debt that they, as a people, did not incur. There are many, many things that people have not been told. How do you feel about being made a beneficiary of somebody else's massive debt without your knowledge or consent? Are we gonna keep going along with this? When you hear some individuals say that the Constitution is null and void, think about how our government has transformed over time from a municipal or service-oriented entity to a corporate or profit-oriented. We are living under the myth that this is lawful, but it is not. We are being ruled by a de facto, or unlawful, form of government, the corporate body of the deathmongers, the controllers. With the passage of the Act of 1871, a series of subtle and overt deceptions were set in motion, all in conjunction and collusion with the Congress, who knowingly and deliberately sold the people down the river. Did they tell you this in government school? I doubt it. They were too busy drumming the fictional version of history into your brain and mind. By failing to disclose what they did to the American people, the people became ignorant of what was happening. Over time, the Republic took it on the chin to the point of a knockdown. With the surrender of their gold in 1933, the people essentially surrendered their law. I don't suppose you were taught that in school either. That's because our real history is hidden from us. This is the way Roman civil law works, and our form of governance today is based upon Roman civil law and Admiralty maritime law, better known as the divine right of kings and law of the seas, respectively. This explains a lot. Roman civil law was fully established in the original colonies even before our nation began, and is also known as private international law. The government, which was created for the District of Columbia via the Act of 1871, operates under private international law, and not common law, which was the law of the constitutional republic. This is very important to note, since it impacts all Americans in concrete ways. You must recognize that private international law is only applicable within the District of Columbia and not in the other states of the Union. The various arms of the corporation are known as departments such as the Judiciary, Justice, and Treasury. You recognize those names? Yes, you do. But they are not what you assume them to be. These departments all belong to the corporation known as the United States. They do not belong to you and me under the corporate constitution and its various amendments that operate outside of the constitutional republic. I refer you to the United States Code. Note the capitalization, indicating the corporation, not the republic. Title 28, 3002, 15 ABC. It is stated unequivocally that the United States is a corporation. See note. Realize, too, that the corporation is not a separate and distinct entity from the government. It is the government. Your government. This is extremely important. I refer to this as the corporate empire of the United States, which operates under Roman civil law outside of the Constitution. How do you like being ruled by a cheesy, sleazy corporation? You'll ask your congressperson about this, you say? Congress is fully aware of this deception. You must be made aware that the members of Congress do not work for you and me. Rather, they work for the corporation known as the United States. Is this really any surprise to you? This is why we can't get them to do anything on our behalf, or to answer to us, as in the case with the illegal income tax among many other things. Contrary to popular belief, they are not our civil servants. They do not work for us. They are the servants of the corporate government, and carry out its bidding. Period. The great number of committees and subcommittees that the Congress has created all work together like a multi-headed monster to oversee the various corporate departments. And, you should know that every single one of these, that operates outside the District of Columbia, is in violation of the law. The corporate government of the United States has no jurisdiction or authority in any state of the Republic beyond the District of Columbia. Let this sink into your brain for a minute. Ask yourself, could this deception really have occurred without the full knowledge and complicity of the Congress? Do you think it happened by accident? You are deceiving yourself if you do. There are no accidents or coincidences. It is time to confront the truth and awaken from ignorance. Your legislators will not apprise you of this information. You are presumed to know the law. They know you don't know the law, or your history for that matter, because this information has not been taught to you. No concerted effort has been made to inform you. As a sovereign, you are entitled to full disclosure of the facts. As a slave, you are entitled to nothing other than what the corporation decides to give you at a price. Be wary of accepting so-called benefits of the corporation of the United States. Aren't you enslaved enough already? I said above that you are presumed to know the law. Still, it matters not if you don't in the eyes of the corporation. Ignorance of the law is not considered an excuse. It is your responsibility and your obligation, as an American, to learn about the law and how it applies to you. They count on the fact that most people are too uninterested or distracted or lazy to do so. The people have been mentally conditioned to allow the alleged government to do their thinking for them. We need to turn that around, if we are to save our republic, before it is too late. The United States government is basically a corporate instrument of the international bankers. This means you are owned by the corporation from birth to death. The corporate United States also holds ownership of all your assets, your property, and even your children. Does this sound untrue? Think long and hard about all those bills you pay, all those various taxes and fines and licenses you must pay for. Yes, they've got you by the pockets. Actually, they've had you by the ass for as long as you've been alive. In your heart, you know it's true. Don't believe any of this? Read up on the 14th Amendment. Check out how free you really are. With the Act of 1871 and subsequent legislation, such as the purportedly ratified 14th Amendment, our once great nation of sovereigns has been subverted from a republic to a democracy. As is the case under Roman civil law, our ignorance of the facts has led to our silence. Our silence has been construed as our consent to become beneficiaries of a debt we did not incur. The sovereign people have been deceived for hundreds of years into thinking they remain free and independent, when in actuality we continue to be slaves and servants of the corporation. Treason was committed against the people in 1871 by the Congress. This could have been corrected through the decades by some honest men, assuming there were some, but it was not, mainly due to lust for money and power. Nothing new there. Are we to forgive and justify this crime against the people? You have lost more freedom than you may realize due to corporate infiltration of the so-called government. We will lose more, unless we turn away from a democracy that is the direct road to disaster, and restore our constitutional republic. In an upcoming article, we'll take a closer look at the purportedly ratified 14th Amendment, and how we became property of the corporation and enslaved by our silence. I am saddened to think about the brave men and women who were killed in all the wars and conflicts instigated by the controllers. These courageous souls fought for the preservation of ideals they believed to be true, not for the likes of a corporation. Do you believe that any one of the individuals who have been killed as a result of war would have willingly fought if they knew the full truth? Do you think one person would have laid down his life for a corporation? I think not. If the people had known long ago to what extent their trust had been betrayed, I wonder how long it would have taken for another revolution. What we need is a revolution in thought. We change our thinking and we change our world. Will we ever restore the Republic? That is a question I cannot answer yet. I hope, and most of all pray, that we, the sovereign people, will work together in a spirit of cooperation to make it happen in this lifetime. I know I will give it my best shot, come what may. Our children deserve their rightful legacy, the liberty our ancestors fought so hard to give to us. Will we remain silent, telling ourselves we are free, and perpetuate the myth? Or do we stand as one sovereign people, and take back what has been stolen from the house of our republic? Something to think about. It's called freedom. Great Britain owns USA, page 1 of 7. Great Britain owns USA by Stephen Kimball Ames. Queen Elizabeth controls and has amended the United States Social Security as follows: SI 1997 number 1778. The Social Security United States of America Order 1997, May 22nd of July 1997, coming into force 1st September 1997. At the court at Buckingham Palace, the 22nd day of July 1997. Now, therefore, Her Majesty, in pursuance of Section 179, 1 and 2 of the Social Security Administration Act of 1992 and all other powers enabling her in that behalf, is pleased, by and with advice of her Privy Council, to order, and it is hereby ordered as follows. This order may be cited as the Social Security United States of America Order 1997, and shall come into force on 1st September 1997. Does this give a new meaning to Federal Judge William Wayne Justice stating in court that he takes his orders from England? This order goes on to redefine words in the Social Security Act, and makes some changes in United States law. Remember, King George was the Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. See Treaty of Peace 1738, 8. The United States Statutes at Large. Great Britain, which is the agent for the Pope, is in charge of the USA plantation. What people do not know is that the so-called Founding Fathers and King George were working hand in hand to bring the people of America to their knees, to install a central government over them and to bind them to a debt that could not be paid. First off, you have to understand that the United States is a corporation, and that it existed before the Revolutionary War. See Respublica v. Swears 1 Dallas 43. 28 U.S.C. 3002, 15. Now, you also have to realize that King George was not just the King of England, he was also the King of France. Treaty of Peace 1738. The United States 8 Statutes at Large 80. On January 22, 1783, Congress ratified a contract for the repayment of 21 loans that the United States had already received dating from February 28, 1778 to July 5, 1782. Now the United States Incorporated owes the King money that is due January 1, 1788 from King George via France. Is this not incredible that the King funded both sides of the war? But there was more work that needed to be done. Now the Articles of Confederation, which was declared in force March 1, 1781, states in Article 12, all bills of credit emitted, monies borrowed, and debts contracted by, or under the authority of Congress, before the assembling of the United States, in pursuance of the present Confederation, shall be deemed and considered a charge against the United States, for payment and satisfaction, whereof the said United States, and the public faith are hereby solemnly pledged. Great Britain owns USA. Page 2 of 7. Now, after losing the Revolutionary War, even though the war was nothing more than a move to turn the people into debtors for the king, they were not done yet. Now the loans were coming due, and so a meeting was convened in Annapolis, Maryland, to discuss the economic instability of the country under the Articles of Confederation. Only 5 states came to the meeting, but there is a call for another meeting to take place in Philadelphia the following year with the express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. On February 21, 1787, Congress gave approval of the meeting to take place in Philadelphia on May 14, 1787, to revise the Articles of Confederation. Something had to be done about the mounting debt. Little did the people know that the so-called Founding Fathers were acutely going to reorganize the United States because it was bankrupt. On September 17, 1787, 12 state delegates approved the Constitution. The states have now become constitutors. Constitutor, in the civil law, one who, by simple agreement, becomes responsible for the payment of another's debt. Black's Law Dictionary 6th ed. The states were now liable for the debt owed to the king, but the people of America were not, because they were not a party to the Constitution, because it was never put to them for a vote. On August 4, 1790, an act was passed, which was titled an act making provision for the payment of the debt of the United States. This can be found at 1 The United States Statutes at Large, pages 138 to 170. This act for all intents and purposes abolished the states and created the districts. If you don't believe it, look it up. The act set up federal districts. Here in Pennsylvania we've got 2. In this act each district was assigned a portion of the debt. The next step was for the states to reorganize their governments, which most did in 1790. This had to be done because the states needed to legally bind the people to the debt. The original state constitutions were never submitted to the people for a vote. So the governments wrote new constitutions, and submitted them to people for a vote, thereby binding the people to the debts owed to Great Britain. The people became citizens of the state, where they resided, and ipso facto by the fact itself a citizen of the United States. A citizen is a member of a fictional entity, and it is synonymous with subject. What you think is a state is in reality a corporation, in other words, a person, artificial-person. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is person. 9F Sup 272 word person does not include state. 12 Aunt Attorney General 176. There are no states, just corporations. Every body politic on this planet is a corporation. A corporation is an artificial entity, a fiction at law. They only exist in your mind. They are images in your mind that speak to you. We labor, pledge our property and give our children to a fiction. Great Britain owns USA. Page 3 of 7. Now, before we go any further, let us examine a few things in the Constitution. Article 6 Section 1 keeps the loans from the king valid. It states, all debts contracted and engagements entered into, before the adoption of this Constitution, shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution, as under the Confederation. Another interesting tidbit can be found at Article 1 Section 8 Clause 2, that states Congress has the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. This was needed so the United States, which went into bankruptcy on January 1, 1788, could borrow money, and then, because the states were a party to the Constitution, they would also be liable for it. The next underhanded move was the creation of the United States Bank in 1791. This was a private bank just like the Federal Reserve Bank, of which there were 25,000 shares issued, of which 18,000 were held by those in England. The bank loaned the United States money in exchange for securities of the United States. Now the creditors of the United States, which included the king, wanted to be paid the interest on the loans that were given to the United States. So Alexander Hamilton came up with the great idea of taxing alcohol. The people resisted, so George Washington sent out the militia to collect the tax, which they did. This has become known as the Whiskey Rebellion. It is the militia's duty to collect taxes. How did the United States collect taxes from the people, if the people are not a party to the Constitution? I'll tell you how. The people are slaves. The United States belongs to the floundering fathers and their posterity and Great Britain. America is nothing more than a plantation. It always has been. How many times have you seen someone in court attempt to use the Constitution and then the judge tells him he can't? It is because you are not a party to it. We are slaves. If you don't believe it, read Pay Delford, Fay and Company versus the mayor and aldermen of the city of Savannah. 14 Georgia 438, 520, which states, but, indeed, no private person has a right to complain, by suit in court, on the ground of a breach of the Constitution. The Constitution, it is true, is a compact, but he is not a party to it. Now back to the militia. Just read Article 1 Section 8 Clause 15, that states that it is the militia's job to execute the laws of the Union. Now read Clause 16. It states that Congress has the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. The militia is not there to protect you and me, it is there to collect our substance. As you can plainly see, all the Constitution did is set up a military government to guard the king's commerce and make us slaves. If one goes to 8 the United States Statutes at Large 116 to 132, you will find the Treaty of Amity, Commerce and Navigation. This treaty was signed on November 19, 1794, which was 12 years after the war. Article 2 of the treaty states that the king's troops were Great Britain owns USA, page 4 of 7, still occupying the United States. Being the nice king that he was, he decided that the troops would return to England by June 1, 1796. The troops were still on American soil because, quite frankly, the king wanted them here. Here is the key to where this started. Many people tend to blame the Jews for our problems. Jewish law governs the entire world, as found in Jewish law by Menahem Elon, Deputy President Supreme Court of Israel, to wit, everything in the Babylonian Talmud is binding on all Israel. Every town and country must follow all customs, give effect to the decrees, and carry out the enactments of the Talmudic sages, because the entire Jewish people accepted everything contained in Talmud. The sages who adopted the enactments and decrees, instituted the practices, rendered the decisions, and derived the laws, constituted all or most of the sages of Israel. It is they who received the tradition of the fundamentals of the entire Torah in unbroken succession going back to Moses, our teacher. We are living under what the Bible calls mammon. As written in the subject index, mammon is defined as civil law and procedure. Now turn to the Shaitar's effect on English law. A law of the Jews becomes the law of the land, found in the Georgetown Law Journal, Vol. 71, pages 1179, 120. It is clearly stated in the Law Review that the Jews are the property of the Norman and Anglo-Saxon. It also explains that the Talmud is the law of the land. It explains how the Babylonian Talmud became the law of the land, which is now known as the Uniform Commercial Code. The written credit agreement, the Jewish Shaitar, is a lien on all property realty, and today it's called the mortgage. The treatise also explains that Great Britain owns the Jews and the Jews are in charge of the banking system. We are living under the Babylonian Talmud. It is where all of our problems originate. It was brought into England in 1066, and has been enforced by the Pope, kings and the Christian churches ever since. It is total and relentless mind control. People are taught to believe in things that do not exist. Now before you scream that the UCC is unconstitutional, I'm sorry people, you're not a party to any constitution. Read the case cite below. But, indeed, no private person has a right to complain, by suit in court, on the ground of a breach of the Constitution. The Constitution, it is true, is a compact, but he is not a party to it. Pay Delford, Fay and Company, versus Mayor and Alderman of the City of Savannah 14 Ga. 438, 520. You have to understand that Great Britain, Article 6 Section 1 the United States and the states are the parties to the Constitution, not you. Great Britain owns USA page 5 of 7. Let me try to explain. If I buy an automobile from a man and that automobile has a warranty and the engine blows up the first day I have it, then I tell the man just forget about it. Then you come along and tell the man to pay me and he says no. So you take him to court for not holding up the contract. The court then says case dismissed. Why? Because you are not a party to the contract. You cannot sue a government official for not adhering to a contract constitution that you are not a party to. You better accept the fact that you are a slave. When you try to use the Constitution, you are committing a crime known as criminal trespass. Why? Because you are attempting to infringe on a private contract that you are not a party to. Then to make matters worse, you are a debt slave, who owns no property or has any rights. You are a mere user of your master's property. Here are just a couple of examples. The primary control and custody of an infant is with the government. Tillman 5. Roberts. 108-62 Marriage is a civil contract, to which there are three parties: the husband, the wife and the state. Van Coten v. Van Coten. 154 NE 146. The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state. Individuals' so-called ownership is only by virtue of government, that is law amounting to mere user, and use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. Senate Document Number 43, 73 Road Congress First Session. Brown v. Welch Supra. You own no property, because you are a slave. Really you are worse off than a slave, because you are also a debtor. The right of traffic or the transmission of property, as an absolute inalienable right, is one which has never existed since governments were instituted, and never can exist under government. Winhamer v. The People. 13 NY Rep 378, 481 Great Britain to this day collects taxes from the American people. The IRS is not an agency of the United States government. All taxpayers have an individual master file that is in code. By using IRS Publication 6209, which is over 400 pages, there is a blocking series that shows the taxpayer the type of tax that is being paid. Most taxpayers fall under a 300-399 blocking series, which 6209 states is reserved, but by going to BMF 300-399, which is the business master file in 6209 prior to 1991. This was US-UK tax claims, meaning taxpayers are considered a business and involved in commerce, and are held liable for taxes via a treaty between the United States and the UK, payable to the UK. The form that is supposed to be used for this is Form 8288, IRPTA for an investment real property tax account. The 8288 form is in the Law Enforcement Manual of the IRS, Chapter 3. The OMB's Paper Office of Management and Budget, in the Department of Treasury, List of Active Information Collections, approved under Paperwork Reduction Act is, where Form 8288 is found under OMB number 1545-0902, which says the United States withholding tax return for dispositions by foreign persons, of the United States Form number 8288, number 8288A. Great Britain owns USA page 6 of 7. These codes have since been changed to read as follows: IMF 300,309, BARD assessment, CP 55 generated valid for MFT 30, which is the code for the 1040 form. IMF 310-399 reads the same as IMF 300,309. BMF 390-399 reads US-UK tax treaty claims. Isn't it incredible that a 1040 form is a payment of a tax to the UK? Everybody is always looking to 26 U.S.C. for the law that makes one liable for the so-called income tax, but it is not in there because it is not a tax. It is debt collection through a private contract called the Constitution of the United States, Article 6, Section 1 and various agreements. Is a cow paying an income tax when the machine gets connected to its udders? The answer is no. I have never known a cow that owns property or has been compensated for its labor. You own nothing that your labor has ever produced. You don't even own your labor or yourself. Your labor is measured in current credit money. You are allowed to retain a small portion of your labor so that you can have food, clothing, shelter, and most of all, breed more slaves. Did you ever notice how many of the other slaves get upset if you try to retain your labor? You are called an extremist, terrorist, and sometimes even a freeman. They say that you are anti-government, when the truth of the matter is you just don't want to be a slave. But you do not have the right to force others to be free. If they want to be a slave, that is entirely up to them. If they want to bow down and worship corporations, let them. The United States, Great Britain and the Pope are not the problem, it is the other slaves. We would be free if the want to be slaves were gone. The United States, Great Britain and the Pope would not even exist, because no one would acknowledge them. I, for a matter of fact, think that those who are in power are also tired of the slaves. All the slaves do is stand around and boo for free health care, free education, free housing, and they beg those who are in power to disarm them. I do agree that a slave should not have access to a firearm. How can you disagree with the government passing out birth control? I hope the breeding of slaves stops or at the very least slows down. You see, we are cows. The IRS is company who milks the cows, and the United States Incorporated is the veterinarian who takes care of the herd, and Great Britain is the owner of the farm in fee simple. The farm is held in Elodium by the Pope. Now to Rome. Convinced that the principles of religion contribute mostly powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, the high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their interests, so intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes, and the contracting powers join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. Article 3 Treaty of Verona 1822 Great Britain owns USA page 7 of 7. If the sovereign pontiff should nevertheless insist on his law being observed, he must be obeyed. Bend. 16. D. Sin. Dioec, Lib. Ix, CVI, and 4. Prati, 1844. Pontifical laws moreover become obligatory without being accepted or confirmed by secular rulers. Syllabus, Prop 28, 29, 44. Hence the jus nationale, federal law, or the exceptional ecclesiastical laws prevalent in the United States, may be abolished at any time by the sovereign pontiff. Elements of ecclesiastical law. Vo. I 53-54. So could this be shown that the Pope rules the world? The Pope is the ultimate owner of everything in the world. See Treaty of 1213, Papal Bull of 1455 and 1492. I could go on and on. His is just the tip of the iceberg. Don't let this information scare you, because without it you cannot be free. You have to understand that all slavery and freedom originates in the mind. When your mind allows you to accept and understand that the United States, Great Britain and the Vatican are corporations that are nothing but fictional entities that have been placed into your mind, you will understand that your slavery was because you believed a lie. For more information, Nicole Terry 630K, Willow Street, High Spire, Pennsylvania 17034, 717-986-0239.